Welcome. Welcome to the Poetry Flash reading series, now virtual, beaming to you from Berkeley. I'm Joyce Jenkins, Poetry Flash editor and director. Like I said, beaming to you from the Poetry Flash office. Today we are pleased to present Brian Komei Dempster and Lee Herrick. Thanks to Mo's Books, in the chat box, there is a bookshop.org link to purchase books by these excellent poets. bookshop.org/list/poetry-flash-readings, and it's in the chat box. To sign up for our event emails, scroll down at poetryflash.org to join our mailing list. Remember to visit poetryflash.org for book reviews, interviews, literary events, and workshops. Here to introduce our poets is Richard Silberg, Associate Editor of Poetry Flash.
Hi, everybody. Hi. This is going to be a wonderful reading. It's a pleasure. Our first poet will be Lee Herrick, who actually read for us. I first heard your poetry, Lee, I think at Watershed. And he's a poet. His writing is soft, almost myth-like, full of a deep, quiet passion. And the book he's going to be reading from is called Scar and Flower, which I guess I won't try to. Joyce introduced it. I don't know if you can really see it, but to quickly express his life position, he was born in Korea and was adopted. So Lee Herrick was the name. That the book is divided into the two sections, Scar and Flower. Scar being dealing roughly with violence of all kinds, and Flower dealing with flowering roughly. It's a much more complicated book than that, but we're doing our best to zoom roughly to the truth here. And towards the end of Scar, he talks of his adoption of his parents, who he refers to as full of grief and readiness, the adoptive parents. And he talks of cursing his mother, although he knows that that's unjust. He talks of it. And that section almost ends with the suicide of a young man in roughly Lee's position, having been adopted and jumping 14 stories in despair. His Korean name, he says, is Lee Kwang Soo, which means bright light after despair. So he says in the poem. I don't know if that's the poem or actually in the name, but Lee Kwang Soo is his born name. The second section is flowering. And we have a poem to Juan Felipe Herrera, the great Chicano poet, who I'm guessing, Lee, might have been your professor at Fresno. And Philip Levine comes in there. He refers, He refers to his Jewish professor. It may have been Philip Levine. And it ends with his daughter, who is, a perfect symbol of flowering. Just to give you the last 5 lines, I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, Lee, but the last 5 lines in this poem, ending with his daughter, how there is a pulse in every book, how looking down into the open page reminds us of prayer, the next night of restoration, the light around her body. So let's give him a warm welcome, Lee Herrick.
Thank you so much, Richard. I really appreciate the thoughtful introduction, and it's great to see you. Before I read some poems, I want to just thank you, Richard, and especially Joyce Jenkins and Poetry Flash and Molly and Mo's books. I could spend my whole time talking about my love for Poetry Flash, but I'll spare everyone. And it's a real joy to read with Brian, a beautiful human being and a marvelous poet. So I'm really glad to be here. So I'm going to read mainly from Scar and Flower, and then I'll read a couple of new poems if there's time. As Richard mentioned, Scar and Flower deals with all sorts of violence. I was thinking about American gun violence and trauma related to that, and other forms of violence. The book came out in 2019, but I started writing it around 2014, where in that one year, Michael Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri, and Tamir Rice was killed, and Eric Garner was killed. And so I hope it's okay. I start off with one of those poems, and then I'll get into the rest of the poems. So this is called What I Hear When I Hear You in My Head. Is the little whisper, the aggregate sorrow, the father's heavy weeping as the son's heavy weeping. What I hear is your artistic response after the massacre. The family of clasped hands, black hands, brown hands, a small child whose brother never had a chance, who holds her father's tearful face and says, "Your eyes are like the moon," is what I hear when I hear you in my head this evening, your laughter like tiny harps. I hear your fatigue as another way to say deprivation. I hear recount, retally. A retaliation is what I hear when I hear you in my head. It's the grace, the charm, the dead, the boy, the dead boy, the boy who died because of the fear, the forest in the other man's heart, the gun. The heartbreak is the sound I hear when I hear you in my head, is how we each sigh with distinction, where fatigue meets fire, where we wake and wonder if we all go out to a field tonight, sit by a fire, say the most honest thing you've ever said in your life. Would any dead boy or girl reappear? Not like a mirage, but reappear. Not like a voice in my head, but a body in this room, with flesh and bones, with his big smile and orange blossoms in his billowing hair. So I was teaching in New York in 2016 for Kundiman. And it was about 2 months after the shooting in Orlando at the Pulse nightclub. where 49 people were killed. And this is titled Rose, at the New York Botanical Garden for Orlando. This sudden desire to bloom near the astonishing splendor of the swamp. There you are, unexpected and delivered grace, rose and botany, petal and lure. When the tourists leave, tell me if you get tired. Why are you the queen? In another country, you are not royalty. Tell me, Rose, about root, soil, wilt. I'm stealing a petal and I know it's a crime. I want the petal to fly from this botanical garden to Orlando, where I cannot place a rose on any altar, but where I imagine 49 roses, near a swamp, in a park, where even small children know, don't terrorize the birds. Let no person deliver terror in a park, in a school, in a dance club. No terror in a dance club. I want to be quiet. The roses admit they don't know why they bloom, but they do. The rose, its pulse, doing its loveliness in a time of disaster, dancing like the world was on fire. Repertoire. And this is a little bit of a shift, but wanted to just read a couple poems about perseverance, among other things maybe. Repertoire. The nastiest lick in the whole damn repertoire is in the first movement, the conductor said to the first violin. A concerto like tonight's is a dream swell, a dark circus of fluted magic, the nasty hell of your own difficult year, awash in a floral weave of ocean foam among the dreaming musicians preparing for the nasty lick, their lips tightened like fists, rusted knives in a deep inventory, one blade for large game, one blade for short trees, one blade for berries, one blade for gutting the whole damn idea. We have what the conductor would call a repertoire. How to maneuver if you aren't in tune. How to bail when the wave overtakes you. When the concerto has such mean licks you almost break. And the lights dizzy the fighter in you, but your repertoire comes back in some animal moment. Your breath now in time with your instrument, and everything aligns as it should. Your glistening body healed from the incision, your flawed key buried under your shining knives, your favorite chapter, your go-to song. I'm just going to trust that you're all still out there. This is called Exile. Exile. Our natural state is not defensive or tense, but water in a resting state. We state this to be true in an age of inquiry, our failure to put what is just before ease. There are lovers in another country reclining by a fire, admitting love in a common language with faith in the exiles of their state, where a woman looks at her friend and says, please, put down your bag and stay. Please, stay to see how the movie ends. Take my hand. I think the city might go up in flames. Okay, so I thought I would read a couple of adoption-related poems. This poem was written for an adopted Korean person a little bit younger than me, named Philip Clay, who was adopted to Philadelphia when he was 8, and then adoptees my age at that time had to be naturalized, and if you weren't, in some cases, you found out much later in your life you weren't a citizen. In my case, I was naturalized when I was 5. So for the first 4 years or so, I wasn't a citizen. Philip Clay was cited and arrested on a misdemeanor and deported back to Korea through a terrible loophole in the law. And I think Richard alluded to this in his intro. In 2017, Philip committed suicide, and I was asked to write this for his service. This is called Elegy for Philip Clay. In my dream, when you fell through the sky from 14 stories high, all burning paper, your body broke into 100 flowers and floated into the clouds. The moon and stars still. Your fire now ash, your spirit free, wild, and true, in a deep calm where country is a black night, a blank question of insufficient starlight, where no child, man or woman, no idea as beautiful as you is ever deported, is ever only the harsh light of your deepest wound. I wish I could have eaten your fire and howled with you. Eclipse, fracture, angelic cloud song. May the wild and broken stars remember you. May you be at peace in a quiet part of the sky. So this is for my Korean birth mother, first mother. How music stays in the body. Your body is a song called Birth or First Mother, a miracle that gave birth to another exquisite song. One song raises 3 boys with a white husband. One song fought an American war overseas. One song leapt from 14 stories high and like a dead bird shattered into the clouds. Most forgot the lyrics to their own bodies or decided to paint abstracts of mountains or moons in the shape of your face. I've been told mothers don't forget the body. I can't remember your face, the shape or story, or how you held me the day I was born, so I wrote 1,000 poems to survive. I want to sing with you in an open field, a simple room, or a quiet bar. I want to hear your opinions about angels. Truth is, angels drink too. Soju spilled on the halo, white wings sticky with gin, as if any mother could forget the music that left her. You should hear how loudly I sing now. I've become a ballad of wild dreams and coping mechanisms. I can breathe now through any fire. I imagine I got this from him or you, my earthly inheritance. Your arms, your sigh, your heavy song. I know all the lyrics. I know all the blood. I know why angels howl into the moonlight. Okay, I'm just gonna read one more from Scar and Flower. This is about a flight. It's got the very original title, Flight, which feels like a universe ago. I could swear I've traveled before, but this is sort of about that, and maybe a little bit about the people we meet and the people we remember and the people we imagine. Flight. The in-flight magazine crossword partially done, a corner begun here, scratched out answers there, one set of answers in pencil, another in the green. The woman with the green ballpoint knew the all-time hit king is Rose, and the Siem Reap treasure is Angkor Wat. And the woman, perhaps en route to hold her dying mother's hand in Seattle, forgot about death for 10 minutes while remembering her husband's Cincinnati Reds hat while gardening after the diagnosis. Her handwriting was so clean. Maybe she was a surgeon, maybe a painter. No, what painter wouldn't know 17 down, Diego's love, 5 letters. In a rush, her dying mother's voice came back to her, or maybe she was a Chinese adoptee, and her first mother's imagined voice said, "Woe I me." At 30,000 feet, you focus on 33 across, Asian American classic, the woman. When a stranger in the window seat sees the clue, watches me write in W and says, warrior. And for a moment, you forget it's your favorite memoir. And she reminds you of lilies or roses, Van Gogh or stems with thorns, art galleries in romantic cities where she is headed, but you should not go. The flight attendant grazes my shoulder. The crossword squares, the letters, the chairs and aisles seem so tight in flight, but there's nothing here but room, really. Maybe the next passenger will know what I do not. 64 down, 5 letters, purpose. And why do we remember what we do? We know the buzz of Dickinson's fly and the number of years in Marquez's solitude, but some things we will never know, as it should be. Why the body sometimes rumbles like a plane hurtling over Southern Oregon. How exactly we fall in love. Or if Frida and Maxine Hong Kingston would have loved the same kind of tea. Okay, I think I'm okay to read just 2 last short poems. These are newer poems. This first one, it does require a little bit of glossing, but I'll try to keep it brief and just say that I was asked to write a poem for the political prisoner İlhan Sami Çomak, who is in prison in Turkey. He was 22 when he was put in prison for allegedly starting a forest fire at a political rally. And after 19 days of heavy torture, he signed a false confession, and he's been in prison for 27 years. And so I was asked to write him a poem. So I thought I'd read this. And I will say that İlhan wrote me a poem back, and it was stunning. So this is for İlhan. It's called In a Daydream. Say there is a field, in it a horse. You haven't seen one in over 15 years, I read. It is indigenous to your country, much like your dreaming, a wilderness no state can own, where the horse, like the dream, can take flight and land on a cloud. Ilhan, here is a true story, separate from the horse or the daydream. I was born in Korea and adopted to the United States. I was 10 months old. I don't know if I was lost, abandoned, given, or stolen, but now I write poems and know they kept me alive. What a blessing to place words near each other to help us breathe. Someday I hope we can share a walk in a field and see a horse. You would know more about them than I ever would, I believe. How they see, how they run, how their calm grace keeps us in light. Okay, and then just one last poem, and I'm sending a lot of love and gratitude to all of you, and thanks for taking some time out on this Sunday. And also, if I may, I just want to say that you're all taking care and staying healthy, and that I think we're on the road to somewhere good here in the coming months. So here's the last one. This is called The Birds Outside My Window Sing During a Pandemic. Kind of tripping out because I'm looking out my window and there's birds. I was asked to write this by Eileen Casanetto. She's one of the laureates in the Bay Area there. And it was a couple months into the pandemic. The birds outside my window sing during a pandemic. What we need has always been inside of us. For some, a few poets or farmers perhaps, it's always near the surface. Others, it's buried. It was in our original design though, pre-machine, pre-border, pre-pandemic. I imagine it like the light one might feel through the body before dying, a warm calm, a slow breath, a sweet rush. There is, by every measure, reason for fear, concern, a concert in the balcony of anxiety, made of what has also always been inside of us, a kind of knowing that everything could break. But it hasn't quite yet and probably won't. What I mean to say is, I had a daydream and got lost inside of it. There were dozens of birds for some reason, who sounded like they were singing in different accents. Shelter in place, shelter in place. You're made of stars and grace, stars and grace, stars and grace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. Beautiful. Our next reader is Brian Komei Dempster, who I'm remembering read for us from his first book, Topaz, back when we were actual flesh and blood people and not the familiar ghosts here on Zoom. He's going to be reading from his, probably all of your reading or most of your reading will be from this new book, Seas. And the protagonist really of Seas, there are three protagonists really, but there's Brendan, who is the son of Brian and Grace. Brian is, I believe I already said this, or maybe I didn't, is half Japanese with a white father, and Grace is Chinese. And Brendan is neurodiverse. I believe he's epileptic. And this writing is in a spare, charged language, powerfully charged. And it's full of hope and despair, and it's full of all of these complex emotions. A lot of the book, in a way, is trying to think of what caused the problem. The book ends with a poem called Tangle, in which Brian and Grace conceive Brendan. And early in the book, Brian remembers this kid in school whose name I think is Jake, who they beat him up. They call him retard, and it's all part of the guilt and the whole meditative process of this book. There's a lot of pain in this book. There's poems to, I think his name is James Bird, a black man killed, horribly dragged behind a truck, horribly. And there's a poem, a psalm to Matthew Shepard, who was again killed in awful violence, awful sexual violence. This book is full of these kind of meditations and passion and hope. So let's give him a warm welcome, Brian Komei Dempster.
Thank you so much, Richard. Can everyone hear me okay? I hope so. So I want to first of all really give a shout out to Lee. That was just a beautiful, gorgeous reading. And I hope you're seeing all the gratitude for you in the chat, and there's a lot of it, which is all well deserved. And as I've listened to those poems and got goosebumps and felt quite emotional, it really made me think of some other poems I'm going to read today that resonate with what Lee did. I also want to thank, as Lee mentioned before, Joyce and Richard and Molly. We are just so grateful to you for the amazing work you do with Poetry Flash, and all of you in the audience who obviously are supporters of Poetry Flash. We really appreciate it. As Lee mentioned, it's great to have you here with us on this Sunday. It's a little bit gray here in the North Bay, but as Lee said, we feel some hope around the corner, and I hope you're all safe. So thank you for the beautiful introduction, Richard. That was really helpful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a sampling of poems from the book, and I'm just going to go in the order that they happen in the book. And that way, I'm hoping you can get some sense of the arc and trajectory, which goes from a sense of in media res and crisis and my son's diagnosis towards what Richard mentioned, a sense of hope, a sense of gratitude, and a sense of deepening love for my son and all he's been through. Intertwined with some of these poems that you'll hear, I think I will read some of the ones that Richard mentioned, because they do resonate with some of Lee's wonderful work that he read today as well. I'm going to start with the poem Seize, and it's Seize. It's the second poem in the book, and I think it sets the stage for what happens in the family after we find out about Brendan. Blue flame in the eye's corner, stove on high, we brace for his flint and spark, our dark surprise, his smile jolts, head unleashed, little body arched, straining in the high chair. We stand to face anything. She steadies his tray, eggs bubble in the pot. I lunge for his spoon, his purple elephant. Water boils over sides. We look to each other, sense the sizzle, his bowl clattering, a reverse crater. We shake off faults. Shells crack, windows shut. We smell the heat, hardened yolks, his brains singed gray, the scorched black dome. We are all hollowed out. So I'm going to skip ahead to later in the first section. And I like how Richard described the idea of my attempt to render a complicated emotion that is not black or white, but full of gray and full of striations all at once. You know, as in Buddhism, right, we can be suffering and at peace, we can feel happiness and pain simultaneously. And that is some of the gift of what my amazing son has taught me. This poem, The Door, gets into some of the family dynamics that happen when you have a son who's nonverbal, epileptic, and you're doing your best to take care of him. And at the same time, attempting to be honest and authentic about how you as a father feel. It's called The Door. If I am not perfect, everything falls apart. I steady my epileptic son, pull the handle of the front door. Stuck, nowhere to go. Last night, I held Grace, entered her. Are you ready for another child? It could help us. Winter rain arrived, the night damp and cold. We slept together for the first time this week. Marriage is our son. Marriage is shutting him out. Would the new child be normal? Protect or resent Brendan? Churning my back, I kneel down, free the mat under the door. I am trying to get us somewhere. It slants open, a sliver of light. My pulse quickens. Where did Brendan go? A crash behind me, his screams. I run to find him on the ground, his head bleeding. What are you doing? I yell at him, at myself. Calm down, Grace says. It's not his fault. We are closed in. She holds him tight. I reach a threshold, pull him back to me. Could I have been there? She touches my wrist. Can Grace and I get back to us? I sleep alone in the room next to his, listening. The strum of blinds, he'll stand up. I'll rush in. Rain sweeps leaves on gutters, more nights apart. Grace's warmth beyond reach. Her words to me when he stopped crying. I'm close to wanting another. My face against her hair, its apple scent. My words shutting her out. Not quite yet. I am trying to stay open. So, you know, this was really the most difficult book I've ever written, and also the most rewarding book in some ways, right? And as I wrote, the father-son journey became the main frame or through line, but I realized there were a lot of things revolving through that. So I do see some Asian Pacific Americans in the audience today, including friends such as Jeffrey Leong and Leona Sevick, and I think I saw Susan Ito. And sorry, I don't know if there's others on the screen But, Leona has this really powerful poem called Chink, and there's some other poems that I've read about similar slurs. So I'm going to read the poem Jap. And, it's actually after Bob Hickok, who wrote a poem about the N-word. He's actually a European American writer. And I think it gets at the idea of the mixed race heritage and some of the other forms of historical seizure that are linked to the medical seizures of my son in the book. Jap. It shot out of Mr. Foster's mouth. I flinched while he took aim at fucking kamikaze crows who dove from the sky, landed in rows of his prized tomatoes, bore into red and yellow flesh. It rode the air, clipped me, an arrow dipped in blood from beaks, sharp and fast as gold beads from his cocked rifle. Mixed with get out, slurred by Budweiser chugs from cans, our neighbor F crumpled with his boot soles, flattened with his flattened with his boot soles. It bubbled in beer foam, softened by the paper bag of heirlooms Mr. F brought to our front door. The best ones. I picked them for you, he told my mother, his gift appeasing the boundary between continents, our backyards, like the free advice he offered my father as I stood behind fence slats listening. Place old tires deep in soil for ripe tomatoes. Scatter seeds for crows. It was his gaze shifting sudden to a bird overhead, his liquored breath and insistence at how sneaky we were. And why did you marry one? He asked my father. You better watch out. His raided garden of fallen globes, a failed crop, my mother Renko and father Stewart growing me their heirloom. Too many shades of us for him, the enemy in me, her almond eyes and olive skin, crows lifting off, Mr. F's drunken misses, bringing him to his knees, his down plane a half century ago, his claps and my gasps when they landed backwards, black bellies up. It cut through my father's nervous smile. Hey, buddy, just don't say it. Mr. F's reply, I won't say it around your wife. I backed away from his bruised harvest. Furrowed trenches speckled with gunpowder, birds flapping wings in dirt, Mr. F's barrel tarnished like his burning plane, sinking into the ocean where he was stranded, shrapnel from his war embedded in parts of me. As Lee said, I hope you're all out there, right? I mean, on Zoom, I can feel you out there. Thank you so much for listening. So I'm going to turn, hopefully, the emotional tone and arc of the book starts to move towards not just the pain and trauma, but a sense of reflection and observation and beginning to understand the power of my son in his nonverbal world. This poem ends the first section. It's called Storm Music. Son, we tried to fix you. Halfway up, you cut out. Starts, stops. Notes bent. Lost music. Warped, you skip inside us. Orange tip. Struck, your flame stains us. We skip a breath and hold you. Grooved dark, unseen nicks. Sky's black disk, we spin between static and song. Your flashes fill our hands starred. Brendan, a storm is not your face. We wait for lightning to be light. Thank you all for the love. You're all an amazing audience. So about 11 years ago, my son is now 16, and he was around 5 years old, 5 or 6. I think it was 5 years old in 2010 of March. He had neurosurgery. And I think this poem is like the fulcrum of the book. It's the heart and center of it. And it's really about what it meant, to have a child so young and attempting to find some way to help him. But again, his bravery and peace and calm in the midst of this is what I learned. And I hope the poem conveys that. It's called Severance. And it's in different sections. And so I'll just pause briefly at the end of each section. Severance. Hand to the wall, I churn and push myself back. Tomorrow, my son cut open. If I could change us. My crawl stroke pulls me through. The pool's cocoon brings Rilke's phrase and my son's bright scan. My feet push off underwater light. I swim back and forth, return to his candled dome. He's on fire, the screen tells us. I touch smooth glass, the heat sealed within. Right lobe, a smoky moon floating in his skull's armor. 12 hours away, darkness begins slowly. Grace packs his suitcase. I raise wild clover, smooth the lawn, lucky four-leaf on the rusted blade. Sky of water, sun of fire, I dive in and out. They could cut too deep. 5 a.m. quiet, tire slick with rain, Grace in the back seat holding him, my hand steering us. Home falling away, blinded by granite and fog. Beyond the jagged mountain, we break through mist, pass over water, cross Golden Gate. He smiles at blinking spires and Presidio hills ahead. I know how hope begins and then doesn't. We take off his clothes, tie the gown. He just turned 5 last month. Sealed in the white envelope of the bed. He kicks and we sever. Give him up through steel doors. A sliver of dysplasia removed. The blaring inside stopped. For now, it's like a quilt placed over him. His head, this new quiet room. Fire cut through fire. The noise extinguished. Stitched lines in flesh. His road turns through us. His arms bound, far from the wound that marks his head. Grace adjusts the gauze. I hold the cup. Water fills his throat. Her hair black waves. Our cold house, his bed waiting. We'll reach there if we begin here. I don't know if you're hearing any of the family noises in the background. I consider it part of the reading. And so if you hear my son or my dog barking, then you can really get a sense of how the household and poetry are. There's not much of a line between them. So when Lee read his really powerful poems early in the reading, I thought I would read this poem called Discovery. And it juxtaposes a difficult situation we went through with Brendan, who's on a ketogenic diet. And so he's not allowed to have sugar. If he does, it's toxic to his blood and can cause seizures. And I juxtapose that with, Lee mentioned a bunch of the names already, so I won't repeat them, which continues today with George Floyd. And it's a sort of mythic story that to me tries to bring in all those collective stories that have happened to African Americans and others juxtaposed to what happened to Brendan. And so again, it's in, I don't know if you can see, there's sections with asterisks in between, and I'll take a pause between those. Discovery. The back of their heads, my son, his son, face down, breath on cement. I drop dark stars of cannabis on my son's tongue to calm his blood. Grace massaged his back, his spastic left arm. We told the school aide, never give him sugar. She nodded at us. It can trigger a seizure. The dad read his son, The Little Prince, The Fire Next Time. Told him, come back before dark. The mom fixed pancakes, bought him new shoes. Keep your hands out of your pockets. Be respectful. Spiking fever, our son so dizzy he drops. Mouth hitting the ground. A broken tooth. Dead roots. Orange slices in his vomit. Did this cause the fall? He couldn't tell us who fed him the fruit. If he could speak, he'd point at her. I didn't do it, the aide keeps telling us. We don't believe. Maybe I gave him a few, she confesses later. He wanted to taste something sweet. We had no idea, the teacher said. She must have done it when we weren't looking. Grace holds my hand. We should have known. Their boy walking home, cell phone left on his bed. Bag in his hand, reaching inside. Red light twisting on his face. The father holding car keys. I should have picked him up. The boy raised his arms. The cops said it wasn't their fault. The silence of our sons, those who are seized, we keep asking. Wow, this is intense. I really appreciate your support. Lee's reading was so inspiring, and because Richard mentioned it, I want to read Shepherd's Psalm. So we do see and feel and realize the interconnections between marginalization, people being seen as the other, whether it's racialized, homophobic, or other types of violence. So this is for Matthew Shepard. It's called Shepherd's Psalm after Psalm 23. Prepare for enemies. Warm your feet from dirt's grave cold. Uncover your voice. The words flying out like leaves into gusts of their rage. Dissolve the fist stain on your face and the rope around your wrists. Lie down in the beaten dark, near pastures green and unbruised. The salt raining down your blood, restoring dusk's ragged edge to smooth plains of terracotta slate. Your gold straw hair igniting the wick of pink dawn. You shall not want. So I'm going to move to the final section, and the final section I feel is important to share with you and to end the reading with. I'll read two final poems. I want to give some love to my parents, Ranko and Stuart, who are here today. I also want to give a virtual hug to Connie Post. I saw her here earlier, and she and I both share the idea of being poets and parents to special needs children. We become friends through that journey together. So this is in the final section. I hope it's the resolve. It's the moving towards resolution. And I hope you feel those poems giving you that different energy as we close out the reading today. This poem, Golden Oak, is about how music speaks to my boy Brendan. And my father is a very renowned musician, and my brother's a talented cellist, Lauren. It's called Golden Oak. The deaf hear music like gold coins in their stomachs. My boy is an oak, receives the wind of our conversation, catches scattered leaves of our words. My father's brass, my brother's string makes sense to him. Gold comes out clear from the slide. Laughter folds inside the bell's rim. Ducks fly out, wonk and quack in the air. A sound forest. Oak hums bright, then deep. The bow smooths out the noise in his head. Brown eyes lit from inside. My gilded sapling. Lee's really moving poem to the political prisoner had the images of horses in a field. And it really made me want to read this poem to close out. And I do dedicate it to my mom, who was in Topaz as a young child, Topaz prison camp, as a Japanese American. And it's, I would say, a homage both to her, but also her spirit and radiance with my son Brendan as his grandmother. And it's in her voice and reflects upon what does it mean to be a Japanese American who was in the camps during World War II, and to now have Brendan, the amazing grandchild. It's called My Mother Watches Horses with Brendan. Through the fence you look out, their hooves breaking new earth. Sleek fur, the shade of bourbon. Kicking up clods of green. I wheel you closer to shaken ground. Grandson, at 10 years old, you pointed them. Once, I thought you said the word horse. Someday I'll paint you the story. Topaz rain galloped over roofs. Barracks thundered. We were the ones corralled. My hands on your shoulders. Your hand taps my wrist. Look, they are flying over crests of hills, running into the sky. Go far enough. Speak what you can. There's love in silence. All things, they come and go. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been lovely being with you today. And I will now mute my mic.
Oh, yeah. Let me thank you both. Lee, Herrick, Brian, Komei, Dempster for zooming so deeply and generously with us this afternoon. Here comes Joyce to sign us off.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who joined us for this reading. Thanks to these two wonderful, wonderful poets. Thank you so much. Please look in the chat box for the Moe's bookshop.org link to purchase these amazing books, Seas and Scar and Flower. So thank you. Thanks for joining us, and see you next week.